Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our conversation today. We are recording this and we will have a Q&A session at the end, so please put your questions into, at the bottom, you'll see a Q&A box. That's a great place to put them and we'll get to it at the end. And then we're gonna go to our compliance slide here to make our lawyers happy. Just for a brief moment. Well, I'm Rachel Bubb. I'm a wealth manager here, and I've been working at the firm for about 5.5 years. And I'm fortunate enough to be joined with Robert Bullock and Carrie Bubb, who are both chief wealth managers here. And they've been in the business a long time. So, Robert, you got started in 1992 at Merrill.
I did.
Carrie, you got started in 1987 at a company called BankVest, which never heard of it, so.
And morphed into TSI, and both are no longer with us.
Okay, well, I guess that's a good thing that you decided in 1996 to leave TSI and then start KWB Wealth. And I love that Robert came along and joined you. So I'd love to hear, how did you two meet? And then also think that it would be a good idea to, start this partnership.
Right. Yeah, so in 1987, I joined a firm after the Air Force called BankVest, which then morphed into TSI. And while I was there, I had created a contact with Southern California Edison, where we were helping Edison pre-retirees. And then that led to maybe an opportunity to actually put somebody in the Edison credit union that could then be more available to meet Edison retirees and employees. So I was out here in the Inland Empire in Redlands, and the credit union is in Irwindale. So we began looking for a person. I actually ran a help wanted ad in a newspaper called the Los Angeles Times looking for Bob.
Wow.
And we got a bunch of different applicants, and lo and behold, I got a resume in the mail from Robert Bullock. I don't think he had an email address back in 1989.
Yeah,
Not yet. 92, right.
I can't imagine mailing a resume these days.
Yeah, we didn't have Indeed, we didn't have any of these new technological opportunities. We did it the old-fashioned way.
And Bob, what made you decide to leave Merrill and work with or respond to this ad?
Yeah, I worked with Merrill, but prior to Merrill, I actually had about a 10-year career doing consumer lending at large credit unions, Continental Airlines credit union. I was VP of lending, but my college background was really investment. And so I saw the ad. Obviously, I transitioned from lending into people who had too much money. That's what investments is about. And then I saw the ad of blending, if you will, the investments with the credit union, and I thought it was a great opportunity, and I'm glad I went for it.
Great. So you guys have a lot of experience, not only in the business, but in life. So this conversation today is to hear about the different things that you've picked up along the way that you think would be important to share. So let's get started with some broad life lessons.
Goodness, where do we start? We could go either business related, or we could go life related,
Relationship related, real estate related,
I know.
All kinds of experiences.
I'd start with, especially if you're young and you're just starting out, have a vision as to what you want to achieve in life. I was fortunate when I was in high school, I would read the financial section of the newspaper. My grandmother, who would stay with us at times, really encouraged me to do that. My grandmother actually went to business school and said, get a business degree because you can do something always with it. And so when I was in college, I actually had a vision of doing exactly what I'm doing today. I know that's rare. Doesn't mean you can't change, but at least I had a vision at some point down the road.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's not a common occurrence. So if someone is getting started or maybe is struggling to create a vision, what would you suggest they do to get started?
Well, for me, it was a little different. I wasn't as fortunate with Bob. Woke up at 18 or 20 and figured out what I wanted to do. I was actually in college. I got a degree in industrial engineering. Then I knew I had to do 4 years in the Air Force. And I also knew I didn't want to do 20 some odd years in the Air Force. I'd come from a military family, and I was tired of moving. So, for me, I think what it is, life has a lot of experiences, but you can't live in the past. You have to also let life not block your future. So experiences are great, but don't just completely be past based. You got to look forward. And for me, what I tried to do is, as I was in the Air Force, I began to read the money section of the USA Today, and everybody else was reading the sports section. I took an investment class when I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, on my way to here to Southern California, and then I decided to get more education. I thought that would be a thing that could help me, do the hard work early, figure out what I wanted to do. And so I got my master's degree and then got out of the Air Force, went to work for BankFest where I took a risk because of the opportunity at that point. And so for me, it kind of just morphed into it. I got lucky. And, for me now, it's what I do isn't really work. I think it's more of a passion. So I'm fortunate that I found that career there, but I wasn't as lucky as Bob that I figured it out at such an early age in life.
And you can start out doing something, but when you're young, it doesn't mean you can't change.
Yeah.
And so at least try, at least get up, and whether you succeed or fail really isn't the question. It's whether you even try.
Yeah. I think there's sometimes pressure that you think you have to do something at such an early age because you watch people accomplishing, but some of the best business owners also didn't start their new business until they were 40 or 50.
Right.
There's a lot of great success stories happening later in life.
Yeah, and I think at a young age, and a lot of you in this, watching the webinar here might be older and say, well, what does this have to do with me? Well, then I would say share it with your children or your grandchildren. It's like whether you're going to be an electrician or an AC repairman, do the hard work early, get the education, the schooling, the training, invest in yourself. And I think the sooner you do that, the sooner the opportunities as they become available, you can pounce on them, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not prepared, you didn't do those things that you needed to do, then when they do finally come, you're not going to be ready. You're not even going to know it's an opportunity.
I would agree with that. I mean, for the older folks, a vision, maybe not starting out, but maybe frankly is have a view as to what do you want to achieve before you die. What's on your bucket list? Do you have a bucket list? Make sure that your house is in order. Do you have wills and trusts and stuff like that?
Do you have a bucket list, Bob?
I am beginning to think of a bucket list.
Yeah.
There's a couple of places I want to go. My father always wanted to go to Australia, but he never could convince my mother to get on the plane. And so I'd like to, at some point, go visit Australia.
Great.
Yeah.
So what about some life lessons that you've learned in terms of investments and financial planning?
I would start out with, frankly, when it comes to financial planning, is starting out with a budget. Especially for the younger folks. And frankly, it's also useful when you're doing retirement planning later in life, is have an idea as to what the income is coming into the household, what the expenses are, and then some basics of if we have any money left over, put some money aside and build up that savings account, that emergency fund in case those things happen. Then figure out as to how much money you put aside for retirement. I know 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds aren't thinking about retirement, but it comes up quickly.
Yeah, and I think if you ask most people, they probably would say, well, I wish I would have started earlier. And I think that's another thing, a good habit to get in is, yes, you can build your budget, but at the same time, you really need to make sure in your budget that you've created a high priority to savings. When I was in the Air Force, I immediately began putting like $100 or $125 in my paycheck into an investment. And then every time I got a raise from second lieutenant to first lieutenant to captain, I would go down to the CBPO, Civilian Based Personnel Office, and I would increase my allotment maybe by 30%. So I didn't save my whole raise. I gave myself a little bit of money to enjoy, but I kept increasing that savings, and that savings became untouchable. In fact, Rachel, I still have one of the stocks I bought in 1984.
Wow.
A position. It's a great company. You all would know it. I'm not allowed to say the name. But I'm a long-term investor, and then usually when I put it away, I try to really make sure it's not used for things in life like toys or things of that nature.
Yeah, I've heard you've had a few regrets though.
Yeah, my regrets have been daggone it. Every now and then I'll get impatient and I'll read things. That's not that good. I'll sell that. And for me, I have more regrets selling than I ever do buying. So it's just every now and then I think something happens and you get, well, there's a better idea and I should have just left it alone. It's like getting out of one line and the other line at the grocery store.
Yeah.
A lot of times you should have just stayed in the line you were in, right?
And my comment is, when I started here, I wasn't young. I was 35. And I remember we were doing financial planning and telling clients, you should be maxing out your 401k. And one of the advisors who was working here at the time suggested, well, if we're telling the clients to it, why don't we do it? And so very, very early on, we all began to max out making our contributions to the 401k.
Got to eat your own cooking.
Yeah, and that was a great idea. And that's one thing I would suggest. Okay, if you're just starting out, at least put 1% away, and then every year ratchet it up, try to max it out each year.
Yeah, because for most of us, the only thing you're gonna have in retirement is what you save, unless you happen to be a policeman or you work for the county or a state or a teacher.
Yeah.
More of us in the private sector, it's really what you save is gonna determine how well you live in the future. And I want to say one other thing about investing. It's like, being on this side of the fence for all these years, I also would like to just tell or caution investors to try to, stay away from some of the negative news, because what happens is we, for some reason, think negative news is more valuable and we need to protect ourselves. And any positive news is Pollyanna, and it's not really that significant. The other thing we tend to do as investors, we tend to get politics influencing our investment decision. Oh, I hate like the last guy. Half the people didn't like the last guy in office, and half the people don't like this guy in office. But somehow the markets seem to get through all that. And it's really not as much, don't give as much credit to the politics as maybe the economic cycle and what people are doing and what companies are doing, and try to just put a little less importance, I guess, on maybe some of that news that can not really help you be a good investor in the long run.
In all the years that you guys have been doing this, have you noticed a shift in how politics has been more of an influence? Or has it always been like this?
My mind, it's always been like that.
Okay.
We still go through business cycles in the US, regardless of what political class is involved. We always like to remind clients, it's not the politics, it's the economy. And so I've always expressed the business cycle sort of like California weather. It's sunny most of the time. Most of the time you're making money, but not 100% of the time. And so when we go through the recessions, they typically last 2 years or less. It sort of goes back to, if you're retired and we're going through a recession, if you got some extra cash that you've built up off to the side, maybe use a little bit of that and less of your retirement account and waiting for the sun to come back.
Yeah, and the irony of it is that when the markets are down and things are bad, that's when risk is at its least point, right? Because price is already corrected. So that's actually a time to try to risk up. But usually what happens is people don't do that. They'll say, well, wait, Terry, I don't want to invest now. Things are bad. I want to wait till things are better. So by the time things get better, it's reflected in the marketplace, and then we're buying things at higher prices. So a lot of this is about behavioral psychology, making sure, your gut might tell you one thing and your brain's telling you the other. And I think you kind of have to step back. And that's what we try to do with investors. We try to coach them to do the right thing. And, even Tiger Woods, a great golf player, as a coach. So I think, trying to minimize some of that negativity. And I think the technology cycle we're in today has helped us bring all that more present faster. It used to be, we get the newspaper, in Edison, you'd get a statement on your investments once a quarter in the mail. Now you can look at it, 28 times a day and see what's going on in the accounts. Or you can see the news feeds or get notifications about, Putin's doing this, or Biden did that, or Trump is that. And it's just really, takes our mind off maybe the longer term and sucks us into the present and, makes us not very happy.
There's a lot of information, but very little wisdom.
Yeah.
Very little context as to what's going on.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's what we bring to the clients.
Right.
Yeah. I read a lot of you read a lot of headlines that cause fear, and then it is true when you open up the article, you find out not really much being said in it.
Sure. And the headlines are trying to get you to click on that article, because viewers are dollars. And every time they can get more viewers, they get more dollars, whether it's a news cycle, whether it's Apple or wherever the notification is coming from. And sometimes, they have a profit motive to kind of hook you in. It's not like, oh, we want to tell investors exactly the right thing to do. It's no, we're looking for eyeballs. Yeah.
So you guys have also a lot of knowledge on the real estate market, because you both are landlords. So
some experience.
Yeah, some experience. So what do you guys think about real estate today? And I know a lot of, at least I talk to people who are a little bit younger, and there's this big dream to have passive income, own property, get that income. And do you still see that as an opportunity for people?
I'll speak from my end. I like having a diversified portfolio. Stocks, bonds, real estate, cash. Just spread it around if you can. And very fortunate 30 years ago of being able to purchase a duplex in Glendale.
I remember when you bought that one.
Yeah, and decided, and there's a picture of it. Looks a little bit better today. and lived in one and rented out the other. And I said to myself, what do I know about being a landlord? But let's try it for 3 years and see how difficult it is. It wasn't that difficult, but it is a business. And before you become a landlord, you got to know what the rules and regulations are, what the eviction laws are, how much you can raise the rent. Can you raise the rent? And so it is a business. Think twice about getting into it, but I'm fortunate to have it, and it's part of my retirement nest egg.
Mhm. But it's not all of your retirement.
No, of course not.
So Bob, you keep making better decisions than I do. You know, I came to California in 1987 and like, but 90, 89, 90, 91, I bought 2 fourplexes and some houses. And they were really, really great educational experiences. They weren't that great as far as an investment. In fact, one of the fourplexes I moved into, because we had to, because of the type of loan, I had a little Honda Accord and I would sleep in this room, and I owned it with another captain in the Air Force. He was a little bigger than I. We were in a, little rough neighborhood in San Bernardino. And I would peek out, make sure my car's still there, my radio's still in my car. I think we lasted about 3 weeks in that apartment, and then we just couldn't take it. And I don't have a picture because it's all fields now. Yeah, but I will say this, it was a very valuable lesson and I don't regret it at all. I learned a lot from it. In fact, that's when I learned to, do plumbing and all the things I needed to do to electrician, because I didn't have the money to afford to pay someone to come in and do things.
And they didn't have YouTube back then, so
No, they had Time Life books that I bought.
oh wow.
And you could buy a book on electricity or a book on plumbing. So I had a whole series that I actually bought to help me, learn how to do things. But I would say this about real estate, at some point too, you are in your life where you are. So young people today that like, wow, I really want to buy a house, but the prices are terrible. I would say in a residential side, I don't see a major crash coming. And at some point you have to live your life, right? You are where you are. So if you're 25 or 30 and you're getting ready to have family and kids, you don't want to wait 5 or 10 years to buy a house thinking prices might come down. And I think if your perspective, look, this is my home, this is where I'm going to live. This is not a quick flip where I'm trying to make a buck and part of my portfolio, then it's okay to buy that house. And if you're going to become a landlord like Bob is and I am on the commercial stuff, you do have to be patient, realize you're going to have ebbs and flows, and you need to be a patient person. And in the end, you're going to be rewarded, but there's times along the way that you're going to feel, boy, this is tough.
And the values of those things will go up and down.
Yeah.
Every asset goes through cycles. And trying to time it is virtually impossible. But at least on the residential side, people need a place to stay. And so I think residential real estate is still a good buy, both as a home and as a rental.
There's some things to do sequentially, right? First, the emergency fund, like you were saying,
Of course.
make sure you're contributing to a 401k, and probably even find your primary home before you went and bought a real estate property.
Well, and that goes
investment
back to doing the work early, right? Make sure you don't have a bunch of credit card debt, automobile payments, because then when the house that you want finally comes available, you might not qualify. Because you have all these other debts, whether they're razors and boats and cars and, credit cards and all the other things. So you got to do that hard work first. And if you do that early on, I think it's going to pay, spades in the future as far as dividends and whatnot. Yeah.
So another thing that I hear a lot from people, old and young, is this time it's different. So anything, like even with the economy and the political cycle, it's different this time. And I think this impacts maybe people who are also saying they don't have time and it's different this time. So what do I do? Is that?
I don't think people change.
Yeah.
The markets are influenced by greed and fear, and I really don't think that's changed. I mean, the reasons why the market go up and down may be a little bit different, but it's usually anything associated with fear and greed. And so, what is it? It's not exactly what's going on today, what happened 30 years ago, but it's usually somewhat related to what's going on.
Yeah.
It's a cycle.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on your horizon, right? What may trigger the event? Was it the financial crisis? Was it a war in Ukraine and oil prices? Was it COVID-19? I mean, those things might be different, but how we, I guess markets go down, then they come back up, they adjust. And I think it's timing. I'm sorry, it's time, not timing. So when you start adding time into the equation, a lot of the risk begins to dissipate some. And I think people also have to remember when we're investing our money, we're investing our money in companies that you guys use every day. It could be the grocery stores, the Costco's, the
Apple.
Home Depots, the Apples, the technology companies. And these companies are in business to try to make the things and services that we as humans want. Because if they can't meet our needs, we're not going to buy their stuff. We don't buy their stuff, they're going to go out of business.
Mhm.
And they don't have printing presses like the US government. So I think sometimes you can't think of maybe that, well, it's the stock market, it's so volatile. I think it's no, we're investing in great companies that make products and services that humanity wants. Could be Disney World, could be the Costco's, the gas stations, the electric vehicles, the houses, the rooftops, and everything else. And I think you got to step back and think about it that way, not, well, I'm just speculating in the stock market.
Mhm.
We do hear from seniors that I'm 60 or 70 years old.
Yeah.
I'm running out of time.
Yeah.
I can't afford to put it all in stocks. And I would agree. That's why you diversify it.
Right.
To make sure that you can still beat. I mean, you could take the other step of playing it too conservative,
Mhm.
putting all the money under the mattress or in savings or checking. And a year and a half ago, before the Fed started to raise interest rates, you were earning virtually nothing.
For 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, and inflation was running at 9 to 11%.
Mhm.
You're actually losing money by not taking some risk by putting into the stocks and bonds. And so there's a happy balance there. But we understand the time factor of running out of time. But you can't play it too risky or too safe.
Yeah.
And we have a saying, market expansions and market contractions, contractions and the economy shrinking on average since going back to the Great Depression, about 1.8 years. Expansions is average, maybe 8 to 9 years. So, short winters, long summers,
Mhm.
so sometimes people say, well, I don't have time. Well, if it's only 18 months, if you don't have time, you're probably going to not be here with us anyway in 18 months. Most of us have that much time. So I think it's kind of also maybe not looking at the statements, not getting overwhelmed with the negative news and trying to be more reflective about the past. And every time we've had a downturn, we've had an upturn. Every time we've had a recession, we've had an economic expansion, and I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, I don't either.
One thing that I've told people too is I don't have time, but then on the other side, what if you do have time? Because we can't predict, we don't know the day we're gonna die. And if you do have time and we didn't plan for that time, at least with a portion of your money, then we're in a bad situation then.
Right.
So you have to be both optimistic
Right.
on that end as well.
And live your life and try to find balance, right?
Yeah.
It's very important. Yeah.
Yes. So as we're wrapping this up, I'd love to hear some of the things that you guys took risks in. You guys have talked a lot about that
higher
today. Yeah.
Went from a salary position to 100% commission.
Yeah. But along the way,
That
you
worked
had
out
some,
though.
you guys have had some fun adventures. So what are, I'd love to hear from each of you, the biggest risk that you took, and then also the thing that the things or the experiences that you're glad you said yes to.
I would say my two biggest risks and things that I did that I look back with fond memories. When I was quite young, and actually before Carrie hired me, I had an opportunity one summer to play polo on the grass in Palm Springs. It was expensive. It was really expensive, but it was an opportunity that came up, and I'm glad I took it. The other is obviously buying the rental property. That's worked out well, and I've learned a lot. And I'd say a third one as well. I currently am working with 72 homeowners within my area. And we're going through the process with the LA County to become the first designated historical district in non-incorporated LA County. And so we're trying to preserve both the history and the view of the historic homes within our neighborhood. We're not there yet. And it's been a lot of work, but it's obviously a risk that we hope will pay off.
Yeah.
About you, Carrie, risks?
Yeah, some of the risks I took was, one day waking up and deciding, what, I need to move forward and start KWB Wealth for a lot of different reasons. And so that was a stretch. Good news was I was prepared, to do that. I had my ducks in a row. In 1999, we bought the land. I really wanted to have a building where I didn't have to go and negotiate leases every 2 or 3 years. So we bought the land, and then I decided to, build the building. And then all of a sudden it was 2001 or 9/11 hit. And we were in the middle of just finishing up the building. We hadn't even moved in yet. In our conference room, some of you guys will see a big mural on the wall. And the idea was to paint a mural from Redlands to New York City. And in the New York City was the skyline. And of course, in the skyline was the World Trade Centers. So my artist, Lori Martin, who's still with us and does work for us, said, well, what do you want me to do about the World Trade Centers? They were now gone.
Mhm.
And we thought about it and whatnot, and then we said, well, let's go ahead and put the towers up there, and then we draped a flag never to be forgotten. But for me at that point is, oh my gosh, you know, there was no air travel, everything just stopped.
Yeah.
It was kind of like March 16th, 2000, everything just shut down, and you think, oh, what have I done? Turned out, you know, both of them to be just fine, and, you know, don't regret it a bit. Yeah.
And what about the things that you've done that you are glad you've done in terms of adventure? The polo, I guess, how come we didn't buy a horse after?
Because I know better.
Right.
Some horses are appreciating us. So
Yes, yeah, but you gotta keep them a while.
Yeah.
My thought would be, one thing that I did, it wasn't a risk, but something that I had an opportunity not too long ago. Was to take a crossing, it wasn't a cruise, but a crossing. From Southampton, England to New York City
Wow.
on the Queen Mary 2. Queen's Grill, so it was a tux at dinner every night.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. But what was even more amazing is going at 6 o'clock in the morning at low tide underneath the Verrazano Narrows Bridge in New York to be able to get underneath the bridge into New York Harbor, rounding the point to get to Brooklyn, but on the left was Statue of Liberty at 6 in the morning with the sun coming up, and it was gleaming. It was amazing to see, and the realization that how many other millions of people had cruised into New York, like my grandfather, in order to be able to take a risk and come to the country. It was an amazing opportunity.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think for me, one of my biggest adventures, whatever, is years ago, I read a book about how they built the Panama Canal. And they started in 1860, it was the French, and then, you know, yellow fever and all the things that happened. Then the Americans came in and think, man, how did they build this thing that far ago, long ago? They didn't have calculators, they didn't have drones to fly over and figure out what's the best routine. They didn't have, you know, a lot of that stuff that we have today. And so I wanted to see it. And so in 2017, we left, we took our boat, we went down to Mexico and then took the boat all the way through the Panama Canal and back. And like, wow, I went through it through the locks, and believe me, it was adventurous, it wasn't easy. I don't need to do it again. I've been there, I can say that.
Yeah.
But I look back and say, yeah, this is, you know, got out of my comfort zone and really did something good. And I think that's important too for people, is sometimes you got to get out of that comfort zone. Because that's where the adventure is and the excitement in life is. You know, if you're always in your comfort zone, you're probably not going to be, you know, doing much or you know, achieving as much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. So, what are some final thoughts, key takeaways for our audience here?
I would highlight taking a risk is, I think, a theme in order to try to get some success in life. Surround yourself with optimistic people. It makes life that much more enjoyable. And something that I've learned from my older clients is taking better care of yourself. First thing I do when I get up in the morning is I have a big glass of water. And I remember in my 20s and 30s being able to tell people that, oh, I need 5 to 6 hours of sleep. Well, that may be possible then, but I think you'll live longer if you're getting 8 hours or more.
Yeah, well,
So take better care of yourself.
Yeah, one thing too, I was gonna say, Bob, is their studies have shown that you tend to pick up the habits of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So consider who you're spending time with, those 5 people, and make sure that those are the habits that you want to be picking up, because whether you like it or not, you probably are.
Yeah.
Wisdom from a 20-year-old.
29-year-old.
There you go.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, it's just a lot better in life to be happy and try to focus on the things that you can control and turn off some of the things that really don't help you. Just like I can get news feeds on different things that happen, whether it's Putin invading Mexico or Russia, you know, but I can't change some of those things. So, you know, try to eliminate the things that really don't help you in the day. And the things that kind of, I guess I heard a saying the other day, it's like, you know, there's things that trigger you, right? Oh, this makes me mad, this makes me unhappy. And there's things that maybe make you glimmer. Wow, look, there's a picture of my grandson. There's a picture of this. There's this friend that I wanted to go see. And try to find ways to eliminate those triggers, those negative things, and move yourself more into the glimmers. that make you happy. And I think that's gonna make you a better investor. It's gonna make you more fun to be around with your family and that's hard sometimes, but it's a lot better to be happy.
Well, I think people forget. I mean, it's good to stay informed, right? You don't want to just completely shut out the world and not know what's going on.
Right.
But there is actually a lot more good news happening out there than there is bad news. And there's this that I follow on social media. It's called the Good News Feed. And it's incredible the things that come up because there is a lot of people out there causing positive change, making an impact, and wanting this world to be a better place.
But sometimes you really gotta search for that
Well,
information.
particularly, yes, in
Positive
our
stuff.
current
Yes,
way that media is
right.
driving revenue.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This was a really great conversation. Thank you, Carrie and Robert. I really loved hearing everything.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, loved hearing everything that you guys have said, and I know I've learned a lot from both of you guys since being here and knowing you, obviously, for my 29 years.
There you
I've
go.
known both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's see if we have any questions. So
I have a question while we're coming to that. Rachel, what words of wisdom would you have for a fellow person in your age bracket? 29, a young 29. You know, that's trying to do things and move forward.
I think so I'm currently getting my MBA at Berkeley Haas, and one of they have their 4 agreements or like their 4 core values of the school. And one of them is like be a student always. And I think that really resonates with me. Always finding areas where I can learn, have courage to learn. And through that learning, it's like remaining humble, it's remaining hungry. And at least for myself, I've seen a lot of like my own success through those learnings. And of course, I've had definitely opportunities where I've failed, but it's been an interesting experience. And if I don't get caught up on those failures, I've been better for it and I've learned from it. So
Sort of like the human experience.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
always wondering, always asking, always going someplace new.
Being curious. I
Yeah.
think that's one thing that I've really tried to remain, and like my husband's really good at bringing fun into everything and being a child, like not a child. I mean, he will be an adult, but he still brings in
He's a child.
a lot of like creative and fun experiences that just make life way more enjoyable.
So one thing I didn't do in this whole thing is give any Carrieism.
Oh, yeah.
So I do have a Carrieism as far as that goes. It goes, when you're ripe, you rot. When you're green, you ripen. So it's kind of like life. Like if you think you have all the answers or you're not open to new ideas, it's going to be pretty hard to grow from that point. So what you want to try to do is like, yeah, stay green, stay curious, push yourself out there. Don't always just live in your comfort zone. Try to be a little more, daring.
Yeah. There's one thing too I heard recently, like don't delay life.
Yeah.
And I think that really resonates because you don't know how long your life will be.
No.
And is it really about the length or is it
No.
more about the width and the
Right.
things that you've done in your time here, people you've spent time with?
Well, and that goes back to one more thing. Most people, I recently lost my father, and we're also at a conference talking about, the bucket list and different things happening. And one of the things that the study concluded was those people that knew they had 6 or months left to live, what most of them regretted was the things they didn't do, not the things they did. So I wish I'd have taken that trip to Disney World or to Southampton back to New York. So getting out there and doing those things so you don't look back in life and say, daggone it, I should have done this.
Yeah.
And you want a thick book of life versus the thin book of life.
Yeah. So for all those people too that don't know if you can go do those things, like talk to your advisor. I think we've also had a lot of conversations with people these days of like, hey, your plan looks great. Go take that trip, buy that purse, go get new patio furniture. There are things that we hold off doing because it's financial. And that's the great thing about having a coach like us is that we can help coach you to go do some of the things that you're hesitant to do because we're confident in your financial plan. So we do have a question. What is the next big thing you'd each like to accomplish and why? That's a great question.
That is a great question. The next big thing, I'm just finishing up building a house from scratch with the help of a contractor and an architect in New Mexico. And so that was my next big thing that's just about finished. And Kara, what's your next big thing?
Yeah, my next big thing is in process. About 2 or 3 years ago, my neighbor passed away and he had a lot of orange groves and old grapefruit groves that were around me. I really wanted to kind of preserve the area, so we ended up buying the property. And we've taken down a lot of the old orange trees. We planted some avocado trees. I was out there yesterday morning at 6 o'clock and the trees have just grown so big in a year and a half. So my big adventure is, okay, how can I turn this into, making it's, how to turn $1 million into $500,000, buy an orange grove or something like that. So my big thing
Make
is,
it pay for itself.
yeah, is to make it pay for itself and preserve the, community. Redlands is the tree city.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's been a fun project, for me.
Yeah. Great. And then what should patient investors look to a signal for more prosperous returns in their portfolios?
To me, it goes back to the economy.
That's a good question.
You need a good environment for companies to sell more products and make more money, because that's obviously what impacts the value of the stocks and bonds. And so we go through cycles. Sometimes the government will hinder it. Sometimes it's confidence in the investor. But I believe in capitalism. I think it may not be the best system out there, but it's one of the better ones. And I like investing in stocks because I truly believe in a capitalist world that somebody out there is going to come up with a new idea, a new cure, and a new solution. And if I'm not starting that company, I'd like to own a little piece of it.
Yeah. And I would say more real time, it's like, we're sitting here, the economy is doing pretty good, really. There are more jobs than there are people willing to fill them. Inflation is coming down. Interest rates are probably very close or at their peak. Probably in the next year or so, rates might start to nudge down because we'll have maybe achieved this inflationary, pressure that we had. And if we can do that and not have a recession, then the economy has a pretty good chance from doing well from here. So I think if we do have a recession, it's going to be pretty mild. It's hard for me to imagine we're going to have a recession again when people are working. If people are working, that means they have jobs, they have money, and people tend to spend money. They want to go to Disneyland. They want to buy that new car. They want to go to Costco.
I guess the question is, are they overspending? Because we've seen a shift in the amount of, I think auto loan debt has actually increased, has succumbed student loan debt. And student loans are about to start in October. And now we've got people that have a student loan starting and they have an auto loan payment to maintain.
And that's likely why you're going to see the Fed come in and begin to pause or lower interest rates, because what they really needed to do was slow things down, and that wasn't in my mind a Biden or a Trump thing. The government threw too much money at COVID. It overstimulated the economy. We're having to pull that back. And as long as we can pull that back without killing or putting out the fire, then I think we're going to be okay. Markets are, not overpriced. Earnings seem to be, starting to come back up. I think we're probably through the worst of it. Now, do I think the market's going to be up 30% next year? No. I think it's more slow and steady, and slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
And trying to time it is impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not in it for 6 months, you're not in it for a year.
Right.
And whether it's good or bad, we know over the longer term, you're compensated for taking that risk.
Right.
Don't try to time this thing.
Yeah.
And also, for the first time in a long time, bonds offer attractive returns. For the last 10, 12 years since 2010, the financial crisis, bonds really didn't provide any kind of return. Today, you can get some decent returns. If the Fed lowers rates, they're really going to do well. So, we're at a better starting point now, I think, when you look at a balanced portfolio than maybe we were, 5 or 10 years ago.
And that's a good point. And what another topic that comes up a lot is, well, if I'm getting that guaranteed return, why wouldn't I just put everything there?
Yeah.
So how do you respond to that for investors?
Well, because the guarantee isn't for that long.
Yeah.
The 10-year treasury is 4 something. Stocks have averaged 8 to 10 over the long run. Even T-bills at 5 or 5.25, that's great, but they mature in a year. And if rates are down, then you're going to renew it to lower rates. So, diversified portfolio, nobody knows.
Yeah. I think that's why, again, like where you come back into is like when I talk to people, they're thinking more short term, what's happening today, when we are as planners planning for the long term. So we're going to be looking at the whole picture, not just at what's right for today. So
That's right.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate it. And if you want to rewatch this, we have a recording.
Or share it with a friend.
Or
Yeah.
please, yeah, share it with a friend. I mean, I think this is great information for people my age and even 30s, 40s, 50s, even older. Please share with your grandkids, your kids, and your friends. Because you guys had a lot of great things to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.